Hello! Today we're going to look at the tools in the toolbox that I use for basic guitar setup and repair. So let's take a look at the most commonly used things here. So you see the three bottles. The one on the left is Dunlop Formula 65 Polish and Cleaner, followed by the Dunlop 65 Lemon Oil for the fingerboard, and then Gurlitt's Guitar Honey, also for dark woods, primarily for wood conditioning for dry stuff. Here I have my dust cloth on the top, the ugly, nasty looking one. That one I use just to get the dust off the finish of a guitar so that I don't just start spraying right on dust and grinding the dust onto the gloss finish and scratching. And here I have two rags, lint-free, non-microfiber. This one up here I use most of the time, and this one's for really fancy guitars. But that's after you dust it off, get all the solid particles off, then you spray this guy on the finish, and then use one of those to buff it out really good. You need some elbow grease too. Over here is, if you have something really nice and you want to present it, you can use the white gloves. Those won't get fingerprints on it for really high-end guitars. Then we move on over here. You see this little package, I think it was from Straplocks, but I put steel wool in there. That's quadruple zero steel wool, the only kind that won't hurt the fingerboard on like a natural rosewood or ebony. And right behind here we have some sandpaper. The purple stuff is finer grit. The regular colored stuff is a little bit tougher grit that I primarily would use for filing down bridge saddles on an acoustic guitar. Here we have some nut drivers. There's two standard size. We get a 1/2 inch, which is good for output jack size, and the size of the potentiometer nut. And then 11 millimeter, 7/16, and then 10 millimeter is the most common for your tuning machine nuts, which are usually loose on most people's guitars, I find. I've got an extra socket, 10 millimeter right there. Here you have a set of dial calipers. Those are good for measuring string gauge, and sometimes you can use it to measure relief in the neck. Here we've got a set of metric and standard size sockets with a little driver. Notice how I wrote a T and an L on the head of the driver, so I know if I'm loosening or tightening, just in case you're rushing. Then we see a bunch of cutters. The green ones on the top I use for most of my cutting of steel strings, followed by a couple of pairs of needle nose, which are very handy for all kinds of things. The fourth ones down are very small. I use those for cutting nylon strings because they don't have a lot of leverage on there. And then the bottom ones are if you're going to grab onto something that you can kind of not worry about ruining, because it'll probably ruin it. Anything with teeth, any of those pliers with teeth, don't just go grabbing stuff. You're going to destroy it if you're not careful. Next we have the assortment of screwdrivers, probably one of the most used things. I've got a Phillips #1 stubby. I got a #1 with a little bit longer handle. This is a little tiny slotted head. It's pretty useless unless you're tightening the set screw on a guitar knob. Those little knobs that are in there. Sometimes they're Allen keys, sometimes they're those little slotted ones. This is my junky #0. Here's my good #0. This is a 1/8 inch slotted. Here's a Phillips 0 again with a bigger handle. It's nice sometimes. This one I use a lot. That's a 6-in-1, so the head is changeable. You can pull that head out and flip it around. You get, I think it's a #1, #2 Phillips, or a bigger and smaller slotted. Then we've got a #1 Phillips, #2 Phillips, another #2 Phillips, followed by a nasty toothbrush, but it's actually really good for getting the dust and grime off of hardware, especially metal bridges like Strat bridges and Les Paul bridges. Just kind of brush the crap out of it and get all the junk out of there. Now some guitar specific things. One of these peg winders, which also has the bridge pin puller. This is by Dunlop. Here's an A tuning fork, a couple of nuts just in case I run into a problem. This is a cheap capo for setting the neck relief. Here is a piece of reed that I use just to break off and fill in a strap buttonhole that's all reamed out. Here's just some cheapo super glue. Here's some gloves, which Look kind of silly, but actually would help if you really have to do a lot of screwing of something so you don't get blisters in your hands. And here we have an assortment of Allen wrenches. I put these ones in the top shelf of my toolbox because I use these commonly. If you look really close, you can see some of those small, thin ones. They're so small they can bend. Those are for bridge saddles. Pretty much all these for bridge saddles, bass guitar, regular guitar. Then this one is my really wrench on it type of Allen key. As you can see, sometimes I grab it with pliers to really twist something that's not moving. This is a special Yamaha one. That's a Martin. That's a really hard one to find, actually. Adjustable wrench, a couple different nut driver style for Taylor, Gibson, PRS. There's your millimeter and SAE Allen key sets. Those are actually really handy to have. I use those all the time. The Sharpie for marking height on a saddle if you're shaving it down. And last but not least, there is a Stanley utility knife for cutting. You never know when you're going to need it. And here is my homemade hammer that I use. I made this to be able to not destroy things. It's a nice and small little head. All that is just a bolt going through a piece of pine here with a couple of nuts on there. There's one, that's actually the head of the bolt, and then this is just a nut. You can change the weight that it puts on it, but it's kind of nice. It's long, and it's easy if you gotta hit down a fret or something. You can use like that. Okay, thank you very much.